Good afternoon. Scott Luton live with you here on Supply Chain Now Radio, special edition. Our session today is jointly presented by the APICS Greater North Jersey chapter and APICS Atlanta. In today's live webinar, we're going to be offering an informational update on two supply chain technologies that are reshaping our industry, drones and IoT. Our guest speakers today, Antoine Martin and Phil Redman, both are with Accenture, and we're going to share some information about them in just a minute. But as always, we're glad to have you here with us today on Supply Chain Now Radio. So let's tackle our ground rules. All of our attendees will be on mute as we're looking to optimize the audio experience. And if we can move right to that second slide there. Now, with that said, let's make it as interactive as possible. So please do submit your questions via the chat toolbar. We'll answer as many as we have time for at the conclusion of today's webinar. And finally, a PDF of today's presentation and the recording will be available in the next few days to each of our attendees. So let's take a minute to recognize our sponsors here on Supply Chain Now Radio. Big thanks to our sponsor, APICS Atlanta, which has been serving the Metro Atlanta community since 1964. APICS Atlanta is a nonprofit industry association dedicated to the supply chain management space. To learn more, visit us at apicsatlanta.org. And special thanks to our sponsor, APICS Greater North Jersey chapter. In fact, we are fortunate to have a board member from the chapter with us here today, serving as my co-host. Let's introduce Cheryl Sakas, Vice President of Programs for the APICS Greater North Jersey chapter. So good afternoon, Cheryl. We're going to recognize you here, and so you can tell us what the organization is up to. And Cheryl, you're on mute, so you'll unmute real quick and join the conversation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you for co-hosting this with APICS Greater North Jersey. At APICS Greater North Jersey, our focus is our members and really providing them the tools they need to help get their career on the fast path towards success. This year, we're closing our year with two great events. On May 21st at Bear, we're co-hosting with IBF an executive panel discussing forecasting your career success, the skills you need for the new supply chain. And on June 13th, we have at Calandras in Fairfield, Confessions of a Counterfeiter with a longtime Johnson & Johnson's executive, Ron Guido. And you can check out these events at our webpage at apics.gnj.org, and you'll find all the details there. Now on to our exciting webinar today. I'd like to introduce Antoine Martin. As Scott mentioned, he is with Accenture, and he is the Managing Director of their Digital Autonomous Systems practice. With 10 years of experience, Antoine is very knowledgeable on drones, and his objective is to accelerate the meaningful adoption of robotic technology. We also have Phil Redman with Accenture, and Phil is the Senior Manager with their digital department and is working with companies, helping them with their digital transformation for new products and services using mobile, cloud, extended reality, and IoT. And Phil has 15 years of technological experience. So without further ado, let's get this webinar started.
Great, and thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate being here. This is a great opportunity to talk about, two fairly kind of cutting edge and developing technologies that, although maybe not recognizable, at least in the detail, to everybody on the call today, but certainly we think is going to be growing of use, and certainly lots of interesting opportunities that we see, today and in the future, around IoT and drones. I'm going to start first, and I'm going to talk about the future of IoT and where IoT is being used today. Certainly, IoT has been around for a number of years in many different type of categories and instances, different industries. But where is IoT kind of growing, and where's the biggest opportunity today, and kind of what we see? And we'll talk about a bunch of different industries and some examples with our clients in that space. When we look at the change in technology landscape, just kind of as an introduction, right? A lot of our clients, when we're talking to them, they have these obviously huge concerns of the products and services that they have today, of how they're supporting their customers, of the technologies they're using to develop or manufacture or provide their own products, and how they're doing distribution and support of those products. The speed of markets is accelerating. There's no doubt about that. And there's technology waves that are part of that. And although IoT technology, capabilities, whether we're talking about the connected capability or the platforms, there have been platforms around for a number of years. And that's certainly accelerating too. And there's not necessarily any general standardization in this space. And so, that's a challenge as many of our clients are kind of looking at IoT and thinking, how they should invest and understand which technology should be the dominant and how they can integrate it into their legacy systems. But, the number of new companies coming out to support different platforms or offering, their own platform, keeps increasing and it becomes a challenge. And, the IoT is not a single solution or technology in and of itself. There are many technologies that are part of it, whether it's through wireless networking, whether it's through cloud platform, whether it's through gateways, whether it's through chipsets on devices, whether it's through some type of operating system, whether it's the artificial intelligence, pieces that can help with, managing the data and the analytics areas that are coming as part of IoT, which are part of, almost every single IoT project, especially for industrials. And there are some common things that we see though that they want, and one of them is the instant access to information and to data, to be able, and not just any data though, but to have data that's going to help them, whether it's in reducing costs, whether it's in increasing productivity, whether it's in being able to provide data to their customers, and so that's a really critical area for them. And there's concern around new companies that are coming out which don't have the legacy infrastructure or legacy data sets that they need to worry about, can build new manufacturing plants, can build new systems that are purely digital. And that's a huge challenge for many companies that aren't pure digital out there today, which is obviously a lot of our existing clients that we have. And then that could lead to new disruptive markets and business models. So where they're looking at and where there's lots of interest in this area is, how we, increase our connectivity and data and productivity based upon, this connectivity. How can we put more intelligence into the products that we're making? That's another huge area. And so lots of interest around that, whether it's in smart products and platform and service innovation. So there's lots of great examples of companies, some that have even gone public, like Lyft and Uber, who are creating a whole new platform, but not really a new product, right? So transportation and taxi services have been around for a long time, but they use technology to create a platform and an economy that's very different than what we've seen in the past. And so we see that certainly that there's a lot of interest, and we get brought in quite frequently around this makeup of that product. There's a big focus on the workforce too, whether it's in the industrial area where there's an aging workforce, field service where there's an aging workforce and challenges on supporting new employees to come in and service different machines or service capabilities in the field. Whether it's fixing commercial air conditioners, an example, or bank machines, whatever that may be. And so there's a challenge and a opportunity to use new technologies to support that, whether it's through augmented reality, whether it's through artificial intelligence. Obviously, mobility has also become a big piece of that. And so even though some are still making that transfer from paper to tablets, there's still a lot of opportunity to support their move and their transformation in there as they find this type of need. And then because of that workforce skill shortage, are there other opportunities to look at how they support their customers and their field service workers with more of the gig economy or liquid workforce, where they may not be full-time workers, but they are supporting the needs of the company. So lots of interest there, and then how this will affect kind of the new economy in the future. And these are really big numbers that are supporting this reinvention. We're seeing up to 6.4 billion devices, connected devices out there, not just mobile phones, but all types of devices and machines that are being connected. And this will grow dramatically over the next couple of years as costs come down for that connectivity, as platform capabilities increase, and service costs for those platforms are reduced as there are more and more cloud competitors to support those capabilities. So huge opportunities in these kind of next generation of capabilities, whether things like chatbots. I mean, AI is the latest and the greatest for sure. And we saw last year, over $12 billion in spending just on AI for using, and analyzing data on supporting customer service as an example, and maybe call centers for lots of different areas. And we'll talk some more about those and the impact within IoT. And so these are really big numbers in this area that, the IoT is part of it. So I know that there might be a lot of different experiences with the IoT, so the Internet of Things, and kind of what that means, even though it's been around for a number of years. So I thought maybe we talk a little bit about first, just to level set kind of how we see IoT, because, although obviously IoT is about connecting things, it's not just about that. Right, the idea is more about what you get after you're connected, right? So, you want to be pervasive, meaning connect as many things as possible, or you want to find the key business cases and enablers, that are going to support the business case for that connectivity and for that effort. Things don't necessarily come connected today, and then you need to be smart about it, right? And so, where's the value that we see? And so, a lot of it is around things like sensing and acting. So, even though, let's say, in the past few years, there have been a number of wireless connectivity to get data off of machines, as an example. A lot of our clients, who are able to do that, then are challenged with what to do with the data. And certainly there are enormous amounts of data that are coming, and some of it may be around, productivity data, some may be about quality data. But there's also a movement to get more into sensor-based data. And so as manufacturing, as an example, sensor-based data could be very helpful, sensing things like heat levels, vibration levels, and looking for anomalies to be able to support better manufacturing through things like preventative maintenance, as an example. So sensors are certainly the next step that many of our clients are looking at to get involved in an IoT. So it's not just having an access to data off the device, but it's also or manufacturing line, but it's also about what's the sensor piece of information that they can look at, and typically vibration and heat are two big ones. And then being able to take that data, and not just all the data, right? 85% of that data may not show any anomalies. 85% of that data may just be business as usual, but finding that 15% of that data and analyzing that and seeing what's changed and why is critical, and then how to act on top of that, and then be able to make those changes and communicate. So as you can see, IoT is not just about putting things on devices and connecting devices together, but it's really more about analyzing that data and then making some changes based on that data too. So what's our vision for IoT? One is that everything is instrumented around there. So we're able to collect sensor data and information data off of all the different devices that are there. People are in control of that, of course, are making decisions. It's not always fully automated, but they're looking at the right data and be able to make the right decisions at the right time. That this infrastructure is connected, right? And so there doesn't have to be just on-site access to that, but it can be connected and centralized and accessed from almost anywhere. Analytics and analytic applications and visual applications to support that type of data is really critical. And certainly, this will help in things like architecture for resilience. So making sure that we are able to support the needs and even prevent some of the issues that we're seeing out there. And we think that vision is going to grow over the next couple of years. You see a huge kind of growth rate that started back in 2014, going through 2018, and lots of different data that connected devices. We're getting up to close to 20 billion connected devices at the end of 2018, and we think that will continue to grow and multiply through the next couple of years too. And so that means more devices, more data, and good data that we can then use to help make decisions. And so that's giving us more experience all the time. And so where are the key solution areas for IoT? So we break this down into a number of different solution areas that IoT is. So IoT doesn't just support the most famous areas of the smart manufacturing and connected plant, but also things around connected buildings. So connecting lighting and thermostat management as an example. So HVAC is really big. Think about the huge cost savings opportunities to automate some of those things. Sensors and lockers and actuators are a big part of connected buildings, for security, for doors as an example. So lots of different opportunities and things in connected buildings. Connected cities is another one. So think about the widespread needs that many cities have around identifying assets as an example, traffic management and automating that, security management. Obviously, water management is a big piece on that. So think about sensors and connected data around things like reservoirs and wells, and when storms are happening, being able to have kind of real-time quality information. So really important for many cities. So connected cities is a huge big area. Everybody's been kind of clued into things like connected vehicles for sure. So there's no doubt whether we're talking about the infrastructure to support connected vehicles, like GPS as an example, or the autonomous vehicle is a big part of IoT. And so we certainly are seeing lots of experiments that are continuing. We think they're getting closer and closer all the time with things like long haul trucking and automated vehicles. It may be a bit of time before we see more passenger vehicles in this space, but for things like trucking and moving goods and transportation, this is a key area that a lot of companies that we're working with are focused on. Another one is connected products. So, whether we think about, your DVR and your set-top box that's at home, obviously things like the connected refrigerator or oven, and, within the connected home, a lot of different products, whether it's your dishwasher or your oven, or whether it's your smartphone, connected to get this information, a lot of consumer goods and service platforms, there's no doubt that that's increasing, and that, many more products today, a very large percentage, have chips in them to connect, so you can see the data that's coming off and then you can control them. Obviously probably the most popular one that we see there are security and heating and cooling systems, like from Nest and Google Nest as an example. And so there you're able to remotely control your home heating and cooling systems, and it's found very useful. So we think we'll see more of those as this becomes more ubiquitous in the consumer goods. Obviously, inhibitors there are certainly around things like cost, and a lot of companies don't want to put chipsets and wireless connectivity just to do it. And so, understanding kind of where the real value is in each of those areas is really critical. Another big area is of solutions that we focus on are things like the connected worker. So think about whether it's the remote worker or even the internal worker, someone in an assembly plant, getting instructions, augmented reality, for doing things like training, or even like the remote worker. We've used different technologies and partners like Texi, which are able to do over-the-shoulder coaching. So, like as I mentioned before, for those field workers who are in the field, repairing something, now they can work with someone, directly through their phone or through, different goggles that they may wear. And now these things are becoming very low cost, and where they were thousands of dollars before, now maybe they're getting down to below, a couple $100s. And so they're becoming very viable, and there's, huge business cases that can be made on this technology, and supporting, even better services in the field. So lots of interesting things on the connected worker that supports, improved efficiencies, and a lot of focus has really been on things like training, for instance. And so using extended reality, virtual reality as an example for virtual training systems is becoming very, very popular. Things like the connected experience to augment that work experience. Robotics is another area within IoT. Connected healthcare is also very, very big right now. So, monitoring people's healthcare conditions, whether it's through a watch, whether it's through a heart monitor, biosensors and probes, remote health for things like diabetics as an example, so they don't have to go in the hospital all the time to submit their information around their blood sugar. They can do that remotely. Doing things like remote dialysis too, and maybe one day, dialysis at home. Or even surgeries at home. So we're working with companies that are putting, these types of ideas together, and so that's all through connectivity. And then, of course, the smart plants, with manufacturing execution systems, preventative maintenance, inventory management. These are, huge enablers and business cases for supply chain as an example. Inventory management is a big one. And so we're going to focus on this discussion for the next, few minutes on these areas of things like smart manufacturing, the connected worker, and connected products. So we're just going to take 3 of these areas and kind of double click a little bit on those and see kind of what's going on out there. So as we kind of look a little bit more on the connected devices, right, using connectivity, using sensors, for more smart products, the idea is, services are based on connectivity between things and customers as an example. And so whether that's in your car, and, obviously an easy example there is things like connecting your phone to the car, for music, for applications, for different types of services. We see a lot in retail and consumer goods. Life sciences is a big one in pharmaceutical, especially utilities. So being able to do things like payments, being able to take, sensors in the home and seeing like where your actual usage for, let's say, electricity is in the home. And so there are some great applications out there for that. And so then you can make some changes to reduce those costs. Whereas, our heat or cooling leaking from the home. So lots of great opportunities there to kind of use IoT in the home as an example. And as I mentioned, obviously are things like connecting to your thermostats as an example. And there's a huge value to our clients to reduce risk and development costs, at the same time generate new revenue streams. And so a lot of it becomes less around just the device that's in the home, but maybe there are platforms and services that you can provide. And so an example of that, let's say for a connected product, maybe like a smart refrigerator, and so you can provide service to that refrigerator. So if it's not cooling effectively, you can do preventative maintenance, and you can provide information and access that remotely from wherever you are, and see, okay, what needs help, and maybe get a repairman out there, right away, or maybe that could even be automated. And then of course there are different platforms, so things like shopping. And so let's say you had a shopping service connected to your refrigerator, and every time you're out of milk, then one of those delivery services to the home would bring milk for you to be able to put in the home. So lots of different platforms and services, and we're going to talk about one, give you an example of one coming up in a minute. And so what we do is we look at how to design the product and the business case, put the strategy together for the clients, and then we have capabilities at Accenture that go across everything from that product origination to and strategy to design. So we have industrial designers, we have hardware designers, we have UX designers, we have operating system designers, to be able to put these different types of product capabilities together, and they work on a team model that we have, where we can go from beginning to end, from origination of the idea to even get something out into the marketplace. And so we can do everything from developing the hardware to the software to the connectivity, and using technology partners, supporting things like in the cloud as an example. So one example of that is a recent new product that came out of the market, just in a test market last fall. This is something called the Bedford Home Bar. And so this is a joint venture that was created between AB InBev, so you may know them from the kind of the alcoholic beverage industry, and Keurig Dr. Pepper, which you may know them from the soft drink industry, and of course coffee industry. So how do you take the same idea that you have for Keurig, where you're able to create coffee very easily and simply through pods, and do the same thing for kind of home cocktails? And so they presented us with that challenge, and over 3 months we worked with them to do strategy and design of what something like that would look like with non-working prototypes, to create this Bedford Home Bar. 15 months later, through 2018 in the fall, this was launched in the marketplace and was had very, very big popularity in a couple of the test markets in the fall for Christmas, and sold out within just a couple of weeks. And so the idea here is that you can take these pods that you see kind of on the bottom, and there are 15 different cocktails, simply insert them into the beverage machine, press down the button like you would with any type of Keurig product, and in just a couple minutes, a cold carbonated cocktail comes pouring out. And so this machine not only can serve those cocktails, but it actually chills the water to the right temperature per cocktail, as well as carbonates it to the certain degree that that cocktail might need. And so the idea is that you don't need to have all the different mixings and all the different things on hand. All you need to do is plug this in, fill it full of water, and then you have 15 different cocktails that you can use at the home. And so a very, very kind of fun thing to do. You'll be able to eventually mix drinks through your phone. You'll be able to, start it up, on your phone, and then, track it on the cloud. And then obviously the big capability for, AB InBev and Keurig Dr. Pepper is, to sell these pods, just like they would with coffee. And you'll be able to order pods and be able to even create new pods, through the cloud, and obviously tracking all the different types of drinks that you like. So some very cool stuff that we're doing and seeing, out there in the connected product space. Next is kind of the industrial workforce vision. And so lots of things, like I mentioned, for industrial workforce. So in some areas, it may be around safety. So, we have certainly a lot of safety equipment, but sometimes accidents do happen. And so we're able to monitor, what's the level of impact to that worker if, say, something falls on their head, or they get hit on the side, or, maybe it's in a gas area or a radiation area, and so able to monitor that in real time. So kind of reduce the exposure to risk for personnel and equipment, and then monitor and make sure, what happened, and have a better understanding. Most of the work today, is around the connected worker and around seamless collaboration. So communicating from worker to worker, as well as I mentioned, kind of training too. Giving them information, right on the device. And so we could do things like even micro training. So someone can be, in their downtime, in between calls or in between action, can, do micro trainings, which may be 30 seconds long or a minute long, and allow them to train in between kind of the work that they're doing. So lots of very cool stuff that we're doing with the connected workforce. One example here from a couple years ago, though, is using Google Glass. And so we worked with KPN, who's a European telecom service provider, and they gave Google Glass to their field service workers who were repairing, let's say, field service sites, so around cellular towers as an example. And so, there's a couple of challenges that these field workers have. One is firstly finding the site. And that don't mean like, the address and locating the site. Those cell towers are pretty big, although a lot of the ones that they have are actually inside buildings. They can get to the outside of the building, but then where's it located inside the building? Often these things, the antennas may be on the roof, but there could be a closet somewhere where a lot of the equipment that needs to be worked on or updated is at. And so this gives them real-time, step-by-step information, even inside the building, to exactly where they need to go. It helped them identify, what the service work was. By showing images onto their displays, their heads-up displays, they can see exactly what needs to be pulled out. It walked them through step-by-step instructions on how to do that replacement. It recorded and monitored the information so that way you can see that it was done accurately, and then time-stamped it at the end to show that that work was completed. And so it made a log record automatically. The workers just loved this. Right, it was just amazing for them because it really reduced a lot of stress that they had, around these types of performances. And so they saw an 11% reduction in overall cost for service teams, a 17% reduction in work error rates, and productivity improvements. A lot of it driven because now they're able to find those closets, very easily versus having to search around if they hadn't been to that site before. So big improvements of 20 to 40%. So we're seeing a lot more information or a lot more usage of this type of information, including, not just on the goggles, but also now you can use the existing tablet or handheld of the user. And so really low cost way of supporting this type of capability. And then finally, I just want to talk about some of the things that we're doing in smart manufacturing. Again, this is kind of like the solid, IoT area where there's a lot of, supply chain cases here. Some key enablers around things like productivity, product quality are really huge. So putting sensors onto machines, for instance, let's say you're, making something that is very temperature sensitive, and if it goes above or below a certain temperature range, that can, really impact product quality. And sometimes product quality in the end, there's testing for that, but sometimes they could get out in the marketplace, and that's very expensive. Imagine being able to measure that real time. So that's huge for things like in the pharmaceutical industry, where that's very, very sensitive and can make a big difference. And so having that understanding of product quality as things are coming off the line versus just doing random testing or, finding out after it goes into the marketplace is very big. Same thing around like operational safety and, inventory management is a big supply chain case here. Locating, connected products, locating that connected raw product, in the warehouse, and then understanding, the usage of it in the manufacturing plant, and inventory levels are very, very big. And so, today a lot of that is done through manual processes or trying to pull some data off the machine, but being able to have real-time data and real-time monitoring on that, and then, connecting that robotics for fulfillment, is a very big interest area from a lot of our clients, which we think will have huge impact on costs. So lots of things that are happening in the manufacturing plant, lots of different applications, whether it's also around security, whether it's something in the control tower and giving dashboards, or right there on the floor in the manufacturing line. So huge opportunities there, and this is kind of one of our busiest spaces, and we don't see anyone anywhere in any industry and any kind of manufacturing who isn't doing something today. Certainly at different speeds, but certainly lots of interest there. And so one example was a company that we did for discrete manufacturing, in the semiconductor world, putting, going beyond just putting connectivity for data on there and putting sensors. Here's an area where, like you said, sensor data is really important to kind of understand things around temperature and vibration and product quality. So able to connect and collect data from lots of different machines. And what happens is, more and more of this data is being analyzed right on the edge. And so instead of sending 100% of that data into the cloud, which could have huge costs for network transmission and for storage, this data now is actually being collected and analyzed at the edge, and maybe 15 to 20% of that data, the most useful data, is sent into the cloud, where we use things like artificial intelligence to create algorithms to identify anomalies, as an example. So we could do things like preventative maintenance and make sure we can take machines offline to do repairs and updates when they're down during a downtime versus them breaking down in the middle of a production run. So huge impact on costs that we're seeing. So those are the three kind of main use cases I wanted to talk about for IoT. And certainly in many of our clients, IoT is a cutting edge technology, but certainly now I'm going to hand this over to Antoine. We're going to talk more about something that's even more cutting edge, is around the use of drones in supply chain. Antoine?
Thank you, Phil. I really enjoyed your presentation, and lots of thoughts going when talking about the the mixing drink thing from my phone, and it's amazing. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening in. We are moving to the second part of our webinar today, talking about drones in supply chain. Next, please. Looking back at drones, you'll see here a photo of a passenger pigeon with, and if you can move back one, Phil. Yeah, thanks. During World War I, that's when we started to see the first cameras on unmanned aircrafts. And that was really used to get information across the borderline, the enemy line. And next, moving to 1945, where drones were used now for the Second World War. And you might recognize here the person in the photo. She was actually found out on an assembly line of radio-controlled model airplanes, and that's Marilyn Monroe, that was actually found on the Van Nuys Air Force base. You're working on drone technology that by then had motors and thermal motors, and was of course quite sophisticated already. And moving down to today, next please, you'll see that drones, and you might have seen the white drones flying around. It's really full of electronics. One of the reasons the advancement in technology has enabled drones to be what they are today is really mobile phones, where CPUs, RAM, embedded electronics, and small cameras have really enabled the drone sector to really take advantage of those manufacturing and the advancement in the miniaturization and the embedded electronics that enables drones to fly and to be so sophisticated. So as you see here, drones are not fairly new. What's new is how they've been applied and the some of the technical capabilities that they have. Next slide, please. You'll see here on the left a number of use cases for how drones are being used by professional and non-professionals alike. Real estate photography is something that's done, many times a day in most countries now, where getting this vantage point is something that was just not available, short of hiring a helicopter, which very few would do. When it really comes to engineering and survey, it's really quite a big area for the usage of drones. I'll give you an example. If you are a highway engineer and you need to survey the banks of the highway, looking at erosion, looking at adding up a ramp of the highway, you need actually very precise measurement of the land, of the actual concrete that already exists, and cutting down on this field measurement of walking sometimes in a very dangerous area. Drones have become really a tool of choice, and I actually know a couple of surveyors that have a drone in their truck and that they have every day ready to be deployed, and it's just becoming another hammer or another GPS for them. Disaster response, I've worked with a number of agencies responding to train derailments and even the wildfires in California, where again drones are really giving a very quick access to the sky and really giving that level of information that otherwise was just simply not available. Law enforcement is is another big one. There's actually a city now in California that responds to 911 calls by sending a drone, and simply the police officer goes to the rooftop of the police station to be able to maintain line of sight with the drone and be able to be on site very quickly, often to an accident. And they started to publish over the last few weeks some of the data, which is really, really staggering numbers in terms of the improvement and the efficacy of responding to 911 calls that I think will be adopted by many. Your construction, environmental impact, accident investigation, of course, motion picture. If you have a keen eye, you might see that a certain scene was shot by a drone in many of your favorite shows, or the James Bond movies have been using drones for, I think, now over a decade. And really this access to the sky with a quality camera has really taken off quite rapidly and being embraced really by professionals who don't care about a photo, they care about a measurement. And with sophisticated software, you can actually obtain some extremely precise measurement from drone data. We'll go through that in a second. Next, please, Phil. So again, use cases you can think of all day. Here's actually a bottle delivery in Las Vegas, in a club in Las Vegas. That was a couple of years ago. That was such an unsafe and I'm sure illegal situation that I think it's only been done once. But being delivered a champagne bottle by the pool of a Las Vegas club is something unique that some took advantage of. And just a couple of weeks ago, that within minutes the firefighters of Notre Dame were on site, and they deployed a drone very quickly to really get this view from the sky of where the fire was and where to best direct not only the water, but people to going inside the building, which represents an enormous danger from wood and roof collapsing on the firefighters. So really having this eye in the sky, whether using thermal images or not, is just of tremendous value, and that's why the adoption has been taking off so rapidly. Next. So what we'll do now is dive into a couple use cases with a little bit more information than what we just talked about. When it comes to farming and agriculture, Japan has, for I think now close to 20 years, used drones not for observation, but really to apply pesticide onto rice fields. It's something that a number of other countries and institutions have adopted. I know there's been quite a bit of research going on in California using the Yamaha drone that has been a workhorse for applying a pesticide. The next photo that you see here with the blue circles is simply counting the number of pumpkins on a pumpkin farm, where through machine learning you can actually apply that AI to drone images to do counting of whatever you want. And so you see here that the application of AI and sophisticated technology is really a good ground for being applied to drone data that is really a new source of data. On the right of the pumpkin patch, you actually see a very precise topography elevation map on the right-hand side of a field where irrigation is really something that is important to the farmer to really apply the proper amount of water, not too much and not too little. And you know that erosion being what it is, and the elements creating a number of storms and changes in the landscape, there always is a need to adapt the irrigation system to a field. And again, a farmer would never have hired a helicopter or a proper aerial survey to do that, but they can do it at a fraction of the cost now thanks to drone. Moving down to the bottom left, you can actually see a kind of a health map of a plot that would show some discrete areas where the plant health is being stressed. And now with some of the modern tractors, instead of applying the fertilizer throughout the field, you can actually apply the right amount of fertilizer at the right spot. And that's really is kind of a core element of precision agriculture, is looking at not the whole plot, but really at, you know, inches of increments within that plot, and really applying the right amount of fertilizer, pesticide, and water to some extent, and getting that precise view of what to apply, where to apply it, and when to apply it is really something that drones are really a key factor in. But you know, for the I would say the average farmer, often getting a drone in the air is simply a way of not having to step on top of the tractor and being able to see above the cornfield, being able to see if there was a feral hog that you know, did damage, or looking at some specific area where the corn is stressed. And using drones as a scouting tool is something that's really easily accessible and inexpensive, and agronomists are starting to also embrace this new level of data to really better prescribe what to apply and where. Next slide, please, Phil. When it comes to transportation, and here, as you see, I've been trying to pick a couple sectors that would be meaningful to supply chains. Again, the application of AI in this time on real-time video fed from a drone, and counting cars, counting, looking at traffic, looking at the at real-time activity going on in transportation has been something that has been more and more adopted, as well as doing inspection of bridges. As you understand, being able to inspect the underside of a bridge is something, of course, important for the safety of all, but also dangerous to the safety of those who are actually performing the work, where often the traffic has to be altered. A special truck with a specific arm reaching to the underneath of the truck is needed, and it's a dangerous activity. It takes time, and being able to do it from the side without having to actually be on the bridge, and having that video or that photos, and be able to do crack detection, looking at corrosion, etc., is something that, through the means of access of a drone, has been adopted, I would say by now, to most than half of the Department of Transportation across the country. Next. In terms of construction, you see here on the bottom left is a construction site that is being monitored by a drone on a regular basis. It can be once a week, it can be once a month, where the superintendent or the owner can actually see the progress of the site, look at where the changes are happening, and in addition to that, actually perform measurements that would be meaningful to an engineer or to the site manager to understand what amount of cement has been poured in, what is the height gained by the floors over the last 3 months, for instance. And having this level of information for a cost-effective amount is something very, very useful in the construction industry, that from a professional standpoint and an engineering standpoint has been the fastest growing sector for the usage of drone over the last 2 years. And you can see here on the right hand side that a fancy 3D model can even be constructed now very easily, just simply from the photos and the video of the drone. That is great for communication, as well as to be able to look at the site from every angle, simply even from a phone nowadays. Next slide, please, Phil. Moving down to logistics, the Swiss Post has tested the use of drone for light packages. On the top right is you see the Google drone that has had quite a bit of news coverage over the last couple of days from having been authorized by the U.S. Department of Transportation to be able to deliver packages. And different drones have different mechanism. The Google drone is actually staying in the air and dropping the package through a wire, while other drones, as you see here from the Swiss Post, are actually landing on a small landing pad. UPS has had at some point a concept where the drone would be augmenting the driver, who would be stopping at a specific point and working to deliver the packages, and the drone would actually be doing the same and augmenting the productivity and the number of parcels being delivered per hour in a specific spot. FedEx took a different approach. A couple of weeks ago, they announced they are door-to-door delivery of packages through a ground robot that would actually even be able to go across a couple of steps. So as you can see here on the left, drones definitely have a future for logistics and package delivery. Everyone is kind of trying to find its niche and its value added. It's a complicated topic, and that's why it has taken time, in addition to the regulators having to authorize the usage. Next. Moving down to inside a warehouse, where counting, inventory management, tracking, surveillance are now starting to be done by drone. This is still a fairly new area. A lot of what some of the actors are doing is actually fairly secret and confidential, so you haven't seen a lot of coverage on those topics. But simply by moving the drone and using computer vision and machine learning and being able to count, being able to read the labels on some of those boxes, and being able to search for specific item is something that is of appeal to augment, again, the worker inside those warehouses that have to cover a lot, and sometimes in a dangerous or unsafe environment. Next. So as you can see here, we talked about a number of different use cases. We talked about specific application, not just of drones to put a camera in the air, but also to derive information and to some extent reached out and disrupt a certain business model. The safety is, of course, an enormous appeal for not having to put somebody at heights. And if you look at the OSHA statistics, falls from heights is something that's really, clearly dangerous, that everyone would like to avoid. Some of the cost reduction is often derived from doing the work faster. If you look at a utility that has to inspect distribution poles, a drone can do about 10x what workers would be able to do, especially if they have to use a bucket truck to be able to perform the inspection. Looking at a number of different industries, 90% of the companies that have adopted drones have been able to get a return on their investment within 1 year, which is quite rapid. In the survey industry, you see between a 7x and a 11x return on the the work being done faster. That includes the measurement from the surveyors that would have to be done by software. So in most cases, how you look at it, there's clear value. Efficiencies, we talked about informed decision making, such as being able to count or extract volumetric measurement, and the level of accuracy or resolution of the data is actually a little bit scary, because, for instance, working with utilities, a utility would be able to find out more defects on their components thanks to the high resolution images of drones, much more than what they would have otherwise, which means they also have to fix what they find more. But in any case, when you look at it, and when you compare that to satellite imagery, for instance, which is constrained in the resolution of it, you really have this new layer of data that you wouldn't have had otherwise at a cost-effective manner of obtaining it. So there's a number of reasons that explain the adoption of drone. I'm gonna wrap up in the next 4 minutes. So let me try to keep up the pace a little bit. Phil, if you can move to the next slide, please. Just talking a little bit of the regulations. Only about 2.5 years ago, you started to have a drone pilot license. So you can see here an example on the left. Looks like a driver license, except it's for a drone. There's now a certification, a test, an exam. It's fully endorsed by the FAA that regulates the airspace. Drone needs to be registered, much like a license plate. A number of parks and cities and jurisdictions have their own regulations on where drones can be or not, which means it's sometimes getting a little complex to fly, because you have the federal regulation, and you have the state, and you have the local jurisdiction that makes it a little bit complex. So you have a number of apps that enable you to stay safe and to stay compliant. The standards is something that is still fairly new to the drone sector. NC is working on a roadmap for creating new standards for drones. Now there's not that many standards that exist for commercial and consumer purposes. But one thing is sure is with the multiplication of drones, a number of agencies are now enforcing quite a bit what fly, what shouldn't fly, where things shouldn't be flying, etc. And it's really for the protection of all, protection from a liability standpoint, protection of privacy as well. Next slide, please. As you can see here, we're not the only ones that have been witnessing the multiplication of drones in the sky. Next, please. Looking at the different sectors, really the typical photography of putting a camera in the air is still the number one reason why people do that. And next one, please. You can see that there's definitely a consumer market and a kind of a toy and entertainment market for drones, as well as a professional level for using drones as I said, another GPS, another tool in the toolbox. Next, please. What we see here is, looking at the disruption, is you see some of the traditional kind of package delivery that are all now getting into the drone game, so to speak, as a way of staying relevant. You also have the e-commerce platforms that are adopting drones. JD.com has had thousands of packages being delivered, I think mostly in China, via drones. Google, as it's in multiple areas of the technology chain, is definitely now starting to become a clear player in in the whole space, as well as Microsoft and Amazon. You also have a number of small players, often are companies less than 5 years old, such as Zipline, that has delivered. So it's a company based in California. They have actually delivered over 10,000 packages, often of blood, to a select number of countries in Africa to really help with medical supply of blood to needing patients. And of course, the traditional aerospace and aviation manufacturers such as Airbus and Boeing are also actively developing platform, mostly for air taxis to transport people, but also to transport packages. Next, please. Just about 2 days ago, I saw a quote from the Pfizer Foundation saying that this type of technology is really disrupting the supply chain efficiencies, and medical companies that have a need to transport packages quickly because their life is at stake are really needing to be an actor in that. So next, please. I'll conclude by saying that drones are simply a new tool in the toolbox, being applied across sectors, that we are switching slowly from observing something with a camera to actually taking an action, such as delivering or even fixing something, and that the integration of drones within a greater topic, such as work order management, such as inventory control, such as safety and security, is actually just starting. Next, please. To get started, how can you get started? I would say first is fly. Maybe you have somebody with a drone. Maybe you've actually flown one yourself. But seeing something from the air and putting a drone in the air is something that just increases the level of understanding, and by the same decreases the level of misunderstanding and misperception about what drones are. Educating yourself, I would say it's something that is today not an option. You see, as we saw earlier, that the disruption is really coming from everywhere, and you, to some extent, have to embrace that and be curious and not be scared or not understanding of what this technology is bringing to the table, because it's something that's here to stay and that is really disrupting a lot of our ways of doing. So with that, I'll be done here. My email next, Phil, please. My email is at the bottom in case any of you want to continue the conversation. Thank you very much. Up to you, Scott.
Thank you, Antoine and Phil. A lot of great information in those two presentations. So to our audience, here is your chance to pose your questions to two subject matter experts in these technology trends that are shaping our supply chain industry. So we want to take the next few minutes and pose your questions to Antoine and to Phil. Joe, thanks for the high five there. Joe, our first feedback session, Phil and Antoine, Joe was a big fan and passed along his well done and great presentation to you both, which I completely agree with. So if you've got a question, use the chat toolbar, send it to us, and we'll pose it to Antoine and Phil over the next couple of minutes here. First question looks like it is for Phil. Phil, what's the best way to get started on the IoT side?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. There's so many different areas and so many different ways to get started that I think it's really important to first kind of take a step back and kind of create your strategy. And we do this quite a bit for our clients, where we come in, we work with them and analyze the different opportunities. We see which are the most right to go forwards, and then create a roadmap and a blueprint for them in order to take those steps. So I wouldn't say the kind of jumping right in and connecting is the best thing to do, but I kind of just take a moment and these are real quick things, 4 or 8 weeks, maybe 10 at the most, to kind of put that plan together, and it saves a lot of headaches in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that perspective there, Phil. Jay also weighs in and talks about how he enjoyed the presentation. So thanks to that, Jay, you and Joe, for your positive feedback. Next question is going to be for Antoine. Here's a great question I have wondered myself. Do I need a license to operate drones indoors?
So indoors, no, the indoor airspace is enclosed and is not under the jurisdiction of the FAA. So you do not need one indoors. That said, you should understand what it is. You should be safe. You should be, trained. So even though there's no drone license needed if you operate inside your warehouse, be a good professional, I would say. However, if you want to use one, and even in your parking lot, be aware, because I think it's above an inch above the ground. If you're outdoor, it's actually under the jurisdiction of the FAA. So even though you are at a park or there's no one around, be cognizant of what you can and cannot do, and that applies even if you are a hobbyist. So again, it's a powerful tool. Be cognizant of the power you have, and use common sense.
Terrific. Thank you, Antoine. So next question comes from Montique. And Montique asks, how do you see LOT and drones working, or IoT, IoT and drones working together in our food system to help provide data from cultivation to consumption? Great question. And I will pose that, Antoine or Phil, whoever would like to tackle that first.
Well, maybe I can start. Is when you grow food and you have to manage the growth and the harvest and when to harvest and everything that can go, including the cost of growth and fertilizer and whatnot. Drones are definitely starting to have an impact. I would say more so on the for very large farmland, where you can actually apply economies of scale. If you're just a small grower, you'll want to use drones just to have an eye in the sky and better see what's going on. But I would say agronomists and seed producers especially are really interested in drones to start having an impact from the raw material creation of the food supply chain.
And Phil, anything to add to that?
No, nothing to add on that. That's, obviously, the one last thing I'd say is, the drones are getting the data, right? So that's where that connectivity comes from, is getting that data and making use of that data is key.
Fantastic. Next question comes from Janine, and she asks, is the U.S. FAA / government keeping up with similar regulators in other countries as it relates to airspace, quote-unquote, invasion due to drones?
I would say a little bit. We could be doing a better job. Some countries are a little bit more advanced when it comes to taking control of the technology and not making sure it goes berserk. Certain countries, a few countries in Europe have been earlier than us in that game and have learned quite a bit. And we can probably do a better job from learning, from them. It's difficult, right? It's the government, etc. I would say now, so there's actually an international organization for airspace control, and UAS or drones is now a very big topic that they discuss commonly. So I would say now a lot better than 5 years ago. Could we learn something from other countries, such as I think is Iceland, who's been doing drone deliveries now for many months? Sure, we could. It's still always difficult to tell the government what they should be doing, but that said, they often are soliciting input from the general public. And just a couple of weeks ago, there was a notice of rulemaking where they solicit input from anyone who would be willing to contribute to the conversation. And they really much want to engage with us. So don't be shy about talking to your representative about what you wish and what you don't wish as well.
Fantastic. Great question, Janine. Phil, anything to add to that?
Nope. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. All right. So our last comment from our audience comes from Julie, and Julie says, "Hey, thanks, Antoine. I work at Pfizer and led our partnership with Zipline." So she's excited to see the quote included.
This is
and
great.
Really looking forward to following the impact that drones can have on access to healthcare. Great commentary there from Julie. Thanks so much. Okay. So that is going to wrap up our Q&A today. Big thanks to bunch of great questions, and thanks to Antoine and Phil for sticking around and sharing their perspective. We're going to be concluding our session this afternoon on just a few final items. First off, Supply Chain Now Radio is pleased to be serving as a media partner for the AME 2019 Lean Summit, which is going to be conducted right here in Atlanta, May 6th through the 9th. And if we could go to that next slide there, please. So you may be familiar with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. The program is going to be featuring great speakers, outstanding plant tours, manufacturing-focused networking. We're going to be broadcasting on-site live on day one, which is May 6th. And you can learn more at ame.org, or you can shoot us a note, and we will get you information on the event. It's open to AME members and non-members. Next up, we want to make sure you're aware of for Transport's 3PL and Supply Chain Summit here in Atlanta in June 2019. EFT is bringing some of the biggest industry names right here to the Supply Chain City for 3 days of thought leadership and executive level networking. We're very pleased to be serving as a media partner, and we will also be broadcasting live from the event, courtesy of Becker Logistics, and you can check them out at beckerlogistics.com. Learn more at events.eft.com, or you can click on this hyperlink that will be on the deck, and it'll take you right to the site where you can learn more all about the programming and even register if you'd like. Lastly, be sure to plug in with us as we broadcast live Monday, just a couple days from now, April 29th, from Blueprint 2019. You can also check out our website for upcoming webinars, podcasts, and events, supplychainnowradio.com. If you're interested in more visibility for your organization, Supply Chain Now Radio sponsorships are available. If there's anything we can do to serve as a resource for you and your organization, if you want any more information on what you heard here today, feel free to shoot us a note to scott@supplychainnowradio.com, and we will make sure you get what you need. So Antoine and Phil, before we conclude today's session, any final thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I guess I could jump in first on that. And I know there's a lot of complexity when people think about IoT, and it often stops them from getting started. But I think a key thing is to get started is to pick, a key use case, start with that strategy and give it a try. I mean, most of our clients that we see, they get a return between 12 and 24 months, depending on what they're doing. And so it's just about getting started.
Outstanding. Antoine.
On my end, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Scott, and you, Cheryl, for hosting this event and having us and enabling us to educate your audience. Very grateful for that. The second is the world is changing, whether we want it or not, and it's out of our control. What we can control is how we react to change and evolve your business, continue to serve your customers, and adapt to change. And the fact that Pfizer and Julie is here, where I just noticed the impact in the medical supply chain of a small company that will really have enormous impact through the medical world is a testament that the world is changing, and we have to evolve and to continue serving our customers with that change.
Outstanding. It's not cash, it's not content, but customers are king. Timeless truth. So as we wrap up today, we'd like to give a big thanks to Antoine Martin and Phil Redman, both with Accenture, as well as my co-host Cheryl Sakas. Big thanks to our sponsors, APICS Atlanta and APICS Greater North Jersey chapters. Of course, big thank you to our audience for participating. On behalf of Supply Chain Now Radio, this is Scott Luton concluding today's episode. We hope to reconnect with you again real soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.